From the outside, Alex and Marissa looked like the picture of love. He was tall, charming, with a carefully rehearsed smile that won over her friends the first night she introduced him. Marissa, bright-eyed and gentle, often rested her hand on his arm as though he were her anchor. They seemed inseparable, two young lovers building a future together. People around them whispered about how lucky Marissa was. Her co-workers teased her when Alex dropped by the office with flowers, his shirt sleeves rolled neatly at the elbows, his tone soft and attentive. To her parents, he was polite, eager to impress. Every move seemed rehearsed, yet genuine enough to disarm suspicion. But behind closed doors, the tone shifted. It began subtly. Alex's questions about her day were laced with too much scrutiny. A missed call turned into an interrogation, wrapped in a smile. "You were busy, huh? With who?" he asked one evening, leaning against the counter as she stirred a pot of pasta. "With Claire," Marissa replied, careful to keep her voice even. "We grabbed coffee after work." His eyes lingered on her, not angry, not yet, just piercing. "You know I don't really like her. She puts ideas in your head. Maybe don't spend so much time with her." Marissa forced a laugh, brushing off the unease. "She's just my friend, Alex. You're overthinking." Still, she found herself canceling the next coffee date. The control grew like a vine, slow, curling, nearly invisible until it wrapped too tightly. If her phone buzzed late at night, Alex would ask to see it. He framed it as concern. "I just don't want people distracting you when you need rest." If she wore a dress he thought showed too much skin, he'd smile thinly and hand her a jacket. She told herself it was love. He cared, that was all. And wasn't this what relationships were? Compromise, sacrifice, adjusting for each other's comfort? Yet, in rare, unguarded moments, doubt crept in. She noticed how his smile never quite reached his eyes when another man so much as glanced at her. She felt the way his hand tightened a little too hard on her wrist when guiding her through crowded streets. One night, sitting across from him at their favorite diner, she caught herself staring at the reflection of their booth in the window. They looked like a perfect couple, laughing over fries and milkshakes. But she couldn't ignore the undercurrent, the way her laugh felt rehearsed, the way her shoulders stayed just slightly tense. "Everything okay?" Alex asked, tilting his head, the picture of concern. "Yeah," she said quickly, pushing away her thoughts. "Just tired." He reached across the table, brushing his thumb against her hand. "You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? You know I just want the best for you." The weight of his words pressed heavy, disguised as care. She nodded, though unease prickled under her skin. The cracks were forming, but no one else could see them. To the world, Alex was the attentive boyfriend who remembered anniversaries and held doors open. To Marissa, he was still the man she believed she loved, though something darker flickered just beyond the surface. And though she couldn't name it yet, a seed of fear had been planted. As Marissa convinced herself that Alex's controlling quirks were signs of devotion, she could not have imagined how far his need for control would grow. The shadows behind his smile were only beginning to surface. Alex watched Marissa sleep, her chest rising and falling in rhythm with the faint hum of the ceiling fan. To anyone else it might have looked tender, almost romantic. But inside him, a storm churned. Each breath she took without him watching felt like a reminder that she had her own world, one he couldn't completely control. He told himself it was love that made him check her phone when she left it unattended. Love that made his jaw clench whenever her coworker David sent a harmless joke in a group chat. Love that made his skin crawl when she laughed too freely around people who weren't him. But it wasn't love. It was fear. Alex had grown up with absence, the hollow slam of a door the night his father walked out, the way his mother's voice cracked each time bills piled higher. Love to him had always been fragile, conditional. People left. People betrayed. unless you gave them no room to do so. He replayed Marissa's words at the diner. Just tired. He didn't believe her. What if she was pulling away? What if Claire was whispering doubts in her ear? What if she was already planning to leave, like his father once left his mother? The thought tightened around his chest like barbed wire. The next morning, as Marissa reached for her keys, Alex leaned against the doorframe. His tone was casual, but his eyes didn't blink. "Who are you meeting after work today?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "No one. Just heading home." He searched her face for cracks, for signs she was lying. "Good. I worry about you, that's all." Her shoulders softened. She kissed his cheek, mistaking his suspicion for care. "I know." That was how it always went. His paranoia wrapped neatly in ribbons of devotion. And she wanted to believe it. Still, Alex couldn't shake the gnawing thoughts. On his drive to work, he imagined her laughing with someone else, imagined her eyes lingering too long on another man. His grip on the steering wheel whitened his knuckles. He needed to be sure. He needed proof that she belonged only to him. That evening, when Marissa left her phone charging in the kitchen, Alex's hands moved on instinct. He scrolled through her messages, scanning for threats. A photo from Claire. A joke from David. Nothing incriminating. Yet to Alex, every interaction was a spark. Every spark, a potential fire. When Marissa returned and saw him holding her phone, her brow furrowed. "Alex, were you going through my messages?" He smiled, quick and disarming. "Of course not. I just picked it up when it buzzed. Relax." Her suspicion lingered, but she forced herself to believe him. That was what she always did. Alex turned away, but inside, a seed of obsession rooted deeper. It wasn't enough to know her schedule. It wasn't enough to peek at her phone. He needed more. Late that night, while she slept again, he sketched something on a notepad in the garage. Lines became shapes. Shapes became structure. A box, sturdy, sealed, escape-proof. He didn't know if he would ever build it, but the thought of it soothed him, like armor against the fear of losing her. In his mind, it wasn't cruelty, it was safety. Safety from betrayal. Safety from abandonment. Safety from the unknown. As he drew, the shadows behind his smile grew darker, and soon Marissa herself would stumble upon the first clue of what his love was truly becoming. The strange wooden box waiting in the garage. The garage was always Alex's space. Marissa rarely entered it. He kept his tools and half-finished projects there, the smell of sawdust clinging to the walls like a second skin. But that evening, when she went searching for the laundry basket he'd borrowed, she noticed something unusual tucked beneath the hanging light bulb's harsh glow. At first glance, it looked like a large wooden chest, taller than a trunk and wide enough for someone to crouch inside. Its surface was freshly sanded, pale pine smooth against the dim shadows. Nails lined its edges with meticulous precision. But what unsettled her wasn't its size. It was the heavy iron lock bolted firmly onto the side. She froze, clutching the basket against her hip. "Alex?" she called softly, her voice carrying a tremor she didn't mean to reveal. He appeared almost instantly, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. His eyes darted to the box, then back to her. For a moment, something unreadable flickered across his face. Irritation, maybe even panic, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "What's this?" she asked, forcing a laugh to mask her unease. "Some kind of giant toy chest?" Alex's smile came too fast, too polished. "It's a project, just something I've been working on. You know me, I need to keep busy." Marissa set the basket down, circling the box slowly. The lock gleamed under the light. She reached out, running her fingers along the edge. "Seems a little intense for a project. Why the lock?" He chuckled, the sound hollow. "It's for storage. Keeps things safe, that's all." Her eyes met his. Safe from what? There was a beat of silence. Then his tone hardened just slightly, enough to chill the air. Safe from people snooping where they don't belong. Marissa blinked, startled by the edge in his words, but just as quickly he softened again, stepping forward to brush a stray hair from her face. I'm kidding. You're too serious sometimes. She forced a smile, but her chest tightened. The unease clung to her like static, buzzing beneath her skin. Later that night, she couldn't shake the image. The box sat in her mind like a splinter, impossible to ignore. Why would Alex need something so big, so carefully built, with a lock strong enough to keep anyone, or anything, inside? She lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing. Every detail replayed in her mind. The quick flicker of panic when she first saw it. The way his voice dropped when she asked too many questions. Just a project, he'd said. But projects didn't look like prison cells. The next morning, she tiptoed back into the garage while Alex showered. Sunlight spilled through the small window, illuminating the box. She crouched, tugging at the lock. It didn't budge. She pressed her ear to the side. Only silence answered. Her hand trembled as she pulled back. She knew she shouldn't be there. Knew if he caught her, his easy smile would fade into something sharper. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. She whispered to herself, "Why does this feel wrong?" The sound of footsteps upstairs jolted her, and she scrambled out, heart racing. At breakfast, Alex was unusually quiet. He studied her too closely, as though he could read her thoughts. Finally, he spoke. "You didn't go back into the garage, did you?" The question was casual, but his gaze cut like a blade. Marissa swallowed, feigning confusion. "No. Why would I?" He nodded slowly, watching her over the rim of his coffee mug. "Good, because some projects are best left alone until they're finished." Her stomach twisted. She forced herself to eat, though every bite felt heavy, unnatural. She told herself again that she was imagining things, that Alex's quirks were harmless. Yet deep down the truth lingered. There was something about that box that wasn't Mia, meant for her eyes. And though she tried to bury the thought, the seed of dread only grew stronger, waiting for the next crack to split wide open. Soon the tension simmering beneath their smiles would erupt, and a single argument would expose just how dangerous Alex's love had become. The box lingered in Marissa's thoughts for days. She tried to laugh it off, tried to believe Alex's explanation, but unease gnawed at her until it hardened into suspicion. One evening, after yet another tense silence over dinner, she finally spoke. "Alex," she began carefully, setting her fork down. "We need to talk." He looked up from his plate, brow lifting. "About what?" "About us." She steadied her breath. "I feel like you don't trust me. You question who I'm with, you check my phone, and that—" Her voice wavered. "That box in the garage, it scared me." For a moment he only stared at her. Then he laughed, low and dismissive. "Scared you? Marissa, it's a wooden box. That's what keeps you up at night?" "It's not just the box." Her tone sharpened, surprising even herself. "It's everything. You don't let me see my friends. You get angry when I don't answer right away. That isn't normal." His fork clattered onto the plate. The easy smile faded. "So what are you saying? That I'm some kind of monster?" "I'm saying you're controlling me, Alex. And it's not love if I'm constantly afraid of upsetting you." The air thickened. His jaw worked as he leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "You should be grateful," he said slowly. "Most men don't care enough to worry. I keep you safe. I protect you from people who don't deserve your time. That's love, Marissa." "No," she whispered, heart hammering. "That's control." The silence that followed was suffocating. He rose from his chair, every movement deliberate, and placed both hands on the table, leaning toward her. His voice dropped into a low, dangerous register. "You think you know what control looks like?" His eyes burned into hers. "You've seen nothing." Her breath caught. "Is that a threat?" He straightened, pacing the room. "It's a reminder. You keep pushing me, and you'll find out how far I'll go to keep what's mine." Tears blurred her vision, but anger surged alongside fear. "I'm not yours to keep. I'm not a position." He whipped around, fists clenched. "Don't talk to me like that!" The roar echoed through the small kitchen, rattling her to the core. Marissa pushed back her chair, her voice breaking. "Listen to yourself. This isn't love, Alex. This is obsession. And if you can't see that, then—" "Then what?" he snapped, stepping closer. His shadow fell across her, heavy and suffocating. "You'll leave me? Just like everyone else?" The rawness in his voice startled her. For a fleeting moment, she glimpsed the wounded child beneath the rage, the boy who had watched people walk away, but the danger in his eyes drowned out any sympathy. "I don't want to leave," she whispered, trembling. "I want us to be healthy. I want you to trust me." He exhaled sharply, running both hands through his hair. "You don't get it, do you? If I don't hold on tight, I lose everything. And I can't lose you, Marissa. I won't." Her chest tightened. "You don't hold on by locking someone in. You hold on by letting them breathe." For a moment the room was still, as if her words might have reached him. But then his expression hardened, and his voice dropped to a chilling calm. "Maybe breathing is a privilege you take for granted." The sentence froze her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Alex turned away, grabbing his jacket from the chair. "I need air," he muttered, though the way he slammed the door suggested anything but calm. Marissa sank into her seat, trembling, the echo of his words reverberating like a warning bell. She tried to steady her hands, but deep down, she knew something irreversible had shifted. The man she thought she loved had just shown her a glimpse of the monster lurking beneath. And soon, that monster would make his move, one that would silence her cries inside the very box she once feared. The slam of the front door still reverberated through the house long after Alex stormed out. Marissa sat frozen at the kitchen table, replaying his words. "Maybe breathing is a privilege you take for granted." The chill of them clung to her skin. She told herself she should leave, grab her keys, and go. Yet when her trembling legs finally moved, it was too late. The front door creaked open again. Alex stepped inside, his eyes wild, his breaths ragged. His jacket hung loose, one sleeve slipping off his shoulder. He looked less like the man she knew and more like something unhinged. "Where were you going?" His voice was eerily calm. Marissa shook her head. "Nowhere. I was just—" "Liar." He moved toward her, each step deliberate. "You were going to run. Don't bother denying it. I saw it in your eyes." Fear surged through her veins. "Alex, please, you're scaring me. Just sit down. Let's talk." "No more talking," he snapped. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist so tightly she cried out. He dragged her across the hallway, ignoring her protests. Her bare feet stumbled against the hardwood as he yanked her toward the garage. "Alex, stop! You're hurting me!" He didn't answer. The garage door groaned open, and there it was, the wooden box. Its pale surface gleamed under the harsh overhead bulb, the lock waiting like a predator's jaws. Marissa's breath caught. "No! Oh, God! No!" He spun her to face him, eyes blazing. "You wanted freedom? You wanted space?" His grip tightened. "Let's see how you handle it." She thrashed, nails scraping his arm, but he shoved her back. The box loomed closer. "Please!" she screamed, desperation shredding her voice. "Don't do this! I love you! I haven't betrayed you." For a moment his jaw clenched as though the words pierced him, but the paranoia drowned out reason. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't hide. And you need to learn. With terrifying strength, he forced her down. Her knees hit the cold concrete, skin splitting against the rough surface. She tried to twist free, but his hands were iron. He shoved her inside, the wood pressing against her shoulders as the lid came down. Darkness swallowed her whole. The sound of the lock snapping shut was louder than any scream. Marissa pounded on the walls, fists bruising instantly. "Alex, please, let me out. I can't breathe in here." From outside, his voice came muffled, calm again. Too calm. "You'll breathe when I say you can. You'll be safe in there. No one can touch you. No one can take you from me." Her screams echoed in the cramped space, bouncing back at her like the cries of someone already buried alive. She clawed at the seams, splinters cutting into her skin, but the wood was unyielding, heavy, and suffocating. The air was thick, tainted with the smell of raw pine and iron from the lock. Each breath grew harder, the darkness pressing against her lungs like a weight. Her thoughts spun wildly. She imagined the box never opening, her body curling smaller and smaller until the air ran out. She imagined headlines, her mother's tears, the silence of being erased. Panic surged into sobs. "Alex, please. I'll do anything. I'll listen. Just don't keep me here." There was no answer, only footsteps retreating. The garage door creaked shut, leaving her entombed in silence. Marissa's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Her body shook violently as she pressed her face against the side of the box, desperate for air. The faintest draft seeped through the cracks, not enough to ease the crushing panic. She tried to steady herself, whispering through gasps. "Stay calm. Stay alive. Someone will hear you." But the words rang hollow in the suffocating dark. Time blurred. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each second marked by the rasp of her breath and the pounding of her fists. She screamed until her throat tore raw, but no one answered. In the stillness, terror settled into her bones. She realized she was utterly alone, trapped not just in a box, but in Alex's twisted definition of love. And though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning. Over the next 4 days, silence, hallucinations, and Alex's chilling visits would break her spirit in ways she never imagined. The first night inside the box was endless. Marissa's screams eventually faded into hoarse whispers, her throat raw, her fists bloodied from pounding against the wood. The silence that followed was worse than her cries. It made her feel as though she no longer existed. Time quickly lost meaning. Darkness was all there was. No window, no crack of light to tell her whether it was day or night. Only the stale scent of pine and the suffocating press of her own fear. Her body ached, knees cramped, shoulders stiffened from being curled in the narrow space. Every sound, her shallow breaths, her heartbeat, became unbearably loud, bouncing back at her in the wooden coffin. Then, the lock scraped. The lid lifted just a few inches, and Alex's face hovered above. His smile stretched, serene, as though he hadn't shoved her into captivity. In his hand, he held a plastic water bottle and a slice of bread. "Here," he said softly, like he was doing her a kindness. "I don't want you starving." Marissa lunged toward the opening, desperation in her voice. "Please, Alex, please let me out. I'll do whatever you want. Just not this." He tilted his head, watching her with unsettling calm. "You don't get it yet. This is for you, to help you understand." Her hands shook as she grabbed the water. Before she could beg again, the lid slammed shut and the lock clicked. The silence returned. Hours, or perhaps days, slid by in fragments. Marissa lost track of how many times she drifted into shallow, nightmare-ridden sleep. In the box, her mind became its own prison. She saw flashes of her childhood bedrow. Her mother's voice calling her for dinner. She imagined herself back at the diner, laughing with Alex before his eyes grew dark. For brief moments, she almost convinced herself it wasn't real, that she would wake and find the world unchanged. But then her stomach growled, and the raw sting of her scraped knuckles reminded her of the truth. The second time Alex opened the box, she didn't scream. She was too weak. He crouched low, peering at her as though she were a specimen in a jar. "You're quiet today," he observed. Her lips trembled. "Because you broke me," she whispered. For a flicker of a second his smile faltered. Then he nodded, as though satisfied. "Good. Maybe now you'll see what love really means." He handed her another scrap of bread, no bigger than his palm, and a half-empty bottle of water. She tried to hold his gaze, but her strength failed. Her head dropped against the wood as he locked her in again. By the third day, hallucinations clawed their way into her mind. She thought she heard voices outside the garage, neighbors chatting, a car pulling in. She banged on the box until her fists bled anew, screaming until her voice cracked. But when silence answered, despair consumed her. She began talking to herself. At first, whispers. "You're strong. You'll survive." Then louder, fragmented conversations with memories of her friends. She pictured Claire, imagined her voice telling her to fight. Sometimes she heard her mother singing softly, and for a fleeting moment it soothed her. But when the voices vanished, the emptiness inside her chest widened. On the fourth day, Alex returned again. The lid creaked open, and his face leaned close. His eyes looked tired, but his smile remained fixed. "You're still alive," he said, almost impressed. Marissa's voice was barely audible. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because," he murmured, "you'd never understand how much I love you unless I showed you what life without me feels like. Out there, you'd forget me. In here, I'm all you have." Tears blurred her vision. "This isn't love. It's torture." For the first time, his expression twitched, a spark of anger flashing in his eyes. But instead of shouting, he only lowered the lid again, slower this time, his words seeping through the closing darkness. "You'll thank me one day." The lock clicked. Marissa lay still, her body trembling, her spirit fraying at the edges. Yet in the pit of despair, a small flame survived, the faintest determination to make it out alive, if only to prove him wrong. And soon, that spark of defiance would grow into something Alex didn't anticipate. Marissa reaching her breaking point, no longer begging, but resisting in silence. The fourth night bled into morning without distinction, but something within Marissa had shifted. She lay curled in the wooden box, exhausted, hollow, yet alive. The tears had dried on her cheeks. The begging had stopped. Her throat was raw, but not from screaming. Only silence remained. It was in that silence that her mind wandered back to another time, another version of herself. She remembered her father teaching her how to ride a bike on their cracked driveway, his voice steady with encouragement. She remembered lying on her bed as a teenager, sketching dress designs, daydreaming of becoming a fashion designer. She had once believed in futures lined with possibility. That girl, the dreamer, was still inside her. And now, inside this suffocating prison, she clung to the fragments of those dreams like lifelines. "If I make it out of here, I'll chase them again. I'll live. I'll live for her." When the lock scraped open again, she didn't flinch. Alex's face appeared, framed by the dim light of the garage. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You're quiet," he said, echoing his earlier observation. Marissa held his gaze. Her lips didn't part, her body didn't rise to plead. She simply stared at him. He shifted uneasily. You're supposed to talk to me. It me. Still, silence. His jaw tightened. He shoved the water bottle into the box, the plastic clattering against her knees. Take it, he ordered. Marissa reached for it calmly, drinking slowly, deliberately, as though each swallow was an act of defiance. Her composure unsettled him more than all her earlier cries. You think you're strong? Alex snapped. You're nothing without me. Nothing. Her voice, soft but steady, finally broke the silence. Then why are you afraid of losing me? The words struck him harder than any scream. His eyes narrowed, his breath quickened. For the first time, Alex's control wavered, not because Marissa begged, but because she no longer did. He slammed the lid down, harder than ever, and the lock clanged into place. But his muttered words seeped through the wood. Don't test me, Marissa. Don't you dare. In the pitch black, Marissa pressed her palms against the walls, feeling their rough texture. He thought this box defined her boundaries, but she realized now it was his cage, too. He was trapped in his obsession, unable to exist without her submission. That knowledge lit a spark inside her. On the 5th day, when he returned again, the shift became undeniable. Alex opened the lid cautiously, as though he expected to find someone broken. Instead, Marissa sat upright, her eyes steady, her breathing calm. You should be begging by now, he muttered. Her reply was simple, almost casual. I'm done begging. He blinked, caught off guard. What does that mean? It means you don't get to decide who I am. The calmness in her tone rattled him more than rage could have. He reached down, gripping her arm tightly. Don't talk to me like that. But she didn't recoil. She didn't cry. She stared at him until he let go, his hand trembling as he pulled it back. For the first time, Alex looked uncertain. Marissa felt it then, the tiniest sliver of power returning to her. She couldn't escape the box, not yet, but she could reclaim herself piece by piece. Alex slammed the lid shut again, but this time his footsteps lingered in the garage. She could hear him pacing, muttering to himself. The cracks in his control were widening, his perfect facade unraveling. Inside the box, Marissa closed her eyes and repeated her father's old mantra. Balance, even when you fall. Get back up. Ride again. She wasn't broken. She was waiting. And as Alex's control slipped further, the battle between them was no longer physical but psychological, one that would soon spiral into dangerous new territory. The garage smelled of sweat and sawdust, the air thick with Alex's pacing footsteps. He muttered under his breath, words Marissa couldn't fully make out through the wooden walls. Yet she could sense his unraveling, each stomp sharper, each pause heavier. Her body was weak, bones aching from days of confinement, but her mind was steadier than it had been since the nightmare began. She repeated her father's voice in her head like a lifeline. Balance, even when you fall. Then it came, the sound that didn't belong. A metallic clatter from outside the garage, sharp and startling. The thud of tools hitting pavement. A voice, muffled but real. Damn it! The neighbor cursed, clearly close enough to hear. Marissa's heart surged. The world beyond this coffin wasn't gone. It was right there, just outside the door. She opened her mouth to scream, but before a sound escaped, the lid above her jerked violently. Alex's face appeared, pale and frantic. His eyes darted toward the garage door, then back to her. Don't make a sound, he hissed. His hands shook as he fumbled with the lock, the metal scraping in his panic. Marissa froze, her instincts at war. Part of her wanted to scream, to pound the walls, but another voice whispered, Wait, watch him. The lock clattered free. For the first time in days, light slashed across her face, blinding her. The sudden brightness seared her eyes, forcing tears to stream down her cheeks. Air, real air, rushed in. She sucked it into her lungs like water to a drowning soul. Alex crouched over her, sweat dripping down his temple. "You hear me? You don't say a word, or I swear." His voice cracked, betraying his desperation. But Marissa wasn't listening. Behind him, faintly, she could still hear the neighbor moving, the scrape of metal against cement. Hope was no longer a fragile thought. It was tangible, just beyond reach. She looked at Alex, really looked. His mask of control was gone. His pupils darted, his lips trembled. This wasn't the confident man who had charmed her months ago. This was a cornered animal, and cornered animals made mistakes. When Alex bent to shove the lid closed again, Marissa moved. Weak as she was, she thrust her hand upward, striking the edge of the lid. It caught him off balance, the wood slamming against his forearm. He cursed, stumbling back. Marissa forced her body upward, her muscles screaming in protest. Every joint ached, but adrenaline burned through her veins. She pushed, shoved, clawed her way toward the sliver of open air. "Marissa!" Alex roared, grabbing for her wrist. Her nails scraped the wood as she twisted free. Her voice finally tore out, ragged and desperate. "Help! Somebody, please!" The neighbor's tools clanged again outside. Silence followed. A silence thick with possibility. Had they heard? Alex's eyes widened, panic overtaking rage. He clamped his hand over her mouth, dragging her halfway out of the box. "Shut up! Shut up, damn you!" His voice shook with terror now, not authority. Marissa bit down, hard. The copper taste of blood filled her mouth, his howl echoing off the garage walls. His grip loosened just enough. She shoved him back with every ounce of strength she had. He staggered, crashing into the workbench. The sound of falling tools exploded through the garage. For a breathless second she thought it was over, that he'd come at her again, stronger, angrier. But Alex froze, his chest heaving, his ears straining toward the silence beyond the garage. Then came the faintest knock at the neighbor's fence. A curious voice called out, "Everything okay over there?" Marissa's heart pounded. Hope was no longer just inside her chest. It was knocking at the door. And as Alex scrambled to regain control, Marissa realized she was no longer the only one hearing the echoes of her prison. The outside world was finally closing in. The neighbor's voice outside pierced the suffocating air. Alex froze, torn between rage and fear, and in that sliver of hesitation Marissa acted. She kicked forward with every ounce of strength left in her. His grip slipped. She scrambled across the concrete floor, her palms raw against the rough surface. The garage door loomed ahead, half-shadowed, impossibly far. Barefoot, bruised and shaking, she lunged for the handle. Alex's snarl ripped through the space behind her. "Get back here!" She wrenched the side door open and stumbled into the night. The cold air slapped her face, burning her lungs as she inhaled greedily. Darkness stretched across the quiet street, broken only by the yellow pools of lamplight. Her body swayed, thin legs buckling beneath her. Each step felt like walking on glass. The soles of her feet tore against gravel and pavement. Still, she kept moving. Behind her, the door banged open. Alex's silhouette burst into view, wild and frantic. His voice carried across the neighborhood. "Marissa!" But for the first time in days, she was not trapped. Her figure, frail and trembling, cut through the street like a ghost. The contrast was jarring. The fragile, battered woman beneath the glowing suburban houses where families slept unaware. Her hospital gown-like t-shirt clung to her skin, damp with sweat and dirt. Her hair hung in tangled strands across her face. At the sound of her sobbing breaths, a porch light flicked on. A man stepped forward, her neighbor, middle-aged, holding a phone in one hand. His eyes widened in horror. "Dear God," he whispered, rushing toward her. Marissa collapsed into his arms, her body shaking uncontrollably. Help me! She rasped, voice raw, each word clawing its way out of her throat. Please, don't let him take me back. The neighbor glanced over her shoulder. Alex lingered at the edge of the driveway, his expression caught between fury and fear. For a moment, it looked as though he might charge forward, drag her back. But the man raised his phone, his voice steady. I'm calling 911 right now, he warned, his thumb already dialing. Stay right there. Alex faltered. His chest heaved, sweat gleaming on his brow. For a second, his mouth opened, as if to spin a lie, some desperate excuse. But no words came. Instead, he backed slowly into the shadows, the night swallowing him whole. Marissa clutched the neighbor's shirt, her tears soaking through the fabric. She could hear the phone ringing, then the calm dispatcher's voice. 911, what's your emergency? The neighbor spoke quickly, his voice shaking with urgency. We need help, right now. A woman's been hurt. She was locked up. Please send police, send an ambulance. Marissa barely registered the words. Her head spun, her vision blurred, but the truth settled inside her like a fragile flame. She was free. For the first time in 4 days, she looked up at the open sky. The stars shimmered faintly overhead, indifferent and eternal. She had thought she would never see them again. Her body trembled violently, but her spirit, though cracked, refused to break. She had survived. The wail of sirens echoed faintly in the distance, growing louder. The sound was no longer something to fear. It was salvation. The neighbor tightened his grip around her shoulders, steadying her as she swayed. You're safe now, he whispered. They're coming. He won't touch you again. Marissa nodded faintly, though deep inside she knew Alex was still out there, his shadow stretching across her memory. But tonight, under the glow of streetlights and the promise of sirens, she had made it out alive, and as the flashing red and blue lights drew near, the question shifted. Not whether Marissa would survive, but whether justice would finally catch the man who had tried to erase her. The night was alive with flashing red and blue. Sirens wailed closer until they screeched to a stop in front of the house. Uniformed officers spilled out, their boots pounding against the pavement. Marissa clung to the neighbor's arm, trembling so hard she thought her bones might shatter. Ma'am, are you hurt? One of the officers asked, crouching to meet her eyes. I'm okay, she stammered, though the word felt foreign. Please, he's still here. He'll run. 2 officers nodded and moved quickly toward the house, weapons drawn. Another draped a blanket over Marissa's shoulders. It smelled faintly of detergent and safety, 2 things she hadn't known for days. Moments later, a commotion erupted from the driveway. Alex stumbled into view, hands raised, his voice desperate and uneven. Wait! You don't understand! He shouted as the officers surrounded him. I wasn't hurting her. I was protecting her. She wanted to stay. On your knees, one officer commanded. This is love, Alex screamed as they forced him down. You don't get it. She needed me. Marissa watched from the curb, her heart pounding painfully. Once, those same words had convinced her to stay. Once they had sounded like devotion. Now they rang hollow, poisoned by cruelty. As they cuffed his wrists and led him toward the patrol car, Alex twisted to look at her. His eyes, once soft and adoring, were wild with betrayal. Tell them, Marissa, he begged. Tell them it was us. Tell them you love me. Her lips parted, but the words he wanted did not come. I don't love you, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Not anymore. Alex's expression fractured. The fight drained from his body as the car door slammed shut behind him. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sirens. An officer approached gently. We're taking him into custody, but we'll need a statement. Marissa nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around her. Her legs still trembled, but they held. With the neighbor's help, she walked toward the waiting cruiser, where a female officer offered her a seat and a bottle of water. "Whenever you're ready," the officer said softly. The words spilled out in jagged pieces at first, about the arguments, the manipulation, the box, about the darkness, the fear, the way time had lost meaning. She spoke of the screams that went unheard and the silence that nearly broke her. Each detail scraped against old wounds, but with every word, the weight lifted just a little more. At one point, her voice cracked. "I thought I was going to die in there," she confessed. "You're not alone anymore," the officer reassured. "And you're incredibly brave." Marissa nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Brave. She had never thought of herself that way. But maybe, in some small way, she was. When the statement was done, she stared out at the flashing lights and the patrol car that now held the man who had once promised her forever. He sat hunched in the back seat, his head pressed against the glass. His lips moved, still muttering about love, but the words meant nothing now. For the first time since this nightmare began, Marissa felt a flicker of control. Her story, once twisted and rewritten by Alex's hands, belonged to her again. The blanket slid off her shoulders as she stood. The night was cold, but she didn't shiver. Somewhere beyond the chaos, dawn's first light was pushing against the horizon. It wasn't over, not yet, but it was a beginning. And as the patrol cars rolled away and the night fell silent once more, Marissa knew the real fight was only just beginning. The fight to reclaim the pieces of herself he had tried to erase. The courtroom lights had faded. The sirens were a memory. Months passed, and yet the wooden walls still followed Marissa everywhere. In the quiet of her therapist's office, she sat across from a woman with kind eyes and a notebook resting on her lap. A clock ticked softly on the wall. The room smelled faintly of lavender, meant to soothe. But Marissa's chest tightened all the same. "How have the nights been?" the therapist asked gently. Marissa twisted the tissue in her hands until it tore. "The same," she admitted. "Sometimes I wake up gasping, convinced I can't breathe. I still hear the lock. I see the dark." Her voice cracked. She forced herself to meet the therapist's gaze. "I know it's not real, but my body doesn't believe me." "That's trauma," the therapist said softly. "Your mind survived something unimaginable. It will take time to teach your body it's safe again." Marissa nodded, though the words barely sank in. Nights were the hardest. She'd jolt awake drenched in sweat, her throat burning from silent screams. Sometimes she swore she felt wood pressing against her arms, smelled the damp air of the garage. Even in daylight, shadows triggered her. The slam of a car door, the creak of floorboards, a man's raised voice in a grocery store aisle. Each one sent her spiraling back inside the box. Trust, too, had become fragile. When friends invited her out, she often declined, unable to silence the fear of hidden intentions. Her world had shrunk to safe spaces. Her apartment, her therapist's office, the quiet corner of a cafe where she could watch the door. Yet beneath the fear, something stubborn had taken root. One afternoon, while recounting a dream where the walls closed in endlessly, Marissa paused. "But I kept pushing," she whispered. "Even when it felt useless, I kept pushing. And then I woke up." The therapist smiled softly. "That's resilience speaking." Resilience. The word felt foreign, like bravery once had, but it lingered in her mind after each session. Slowly, she began to test its meaning. She signed up for a self-defense class, her hands shaking as she walked into the studio. She forced herself to walk outside at night, even if only to the corner of her block. Each step was small. Each step mattered. Sometimes her progress faltered. Once she froze in a grocery aisle when a man brushed too close. Another time she canceled plans last minute, overwhelmed by the thought of crowded streets. Guilt gnawed at her then, whispering that Alex still controlled her life. But she returned to therapy and said the words aloud. "I don't want to live inside his box anymore. I won't." Saying it made her throat ache, but it also made her feel lighter. In one session, the therapist asked her to picture the box again, to see it clearly, to remember the darkness, the suffocation, then to imagine it burning, splintering to ash, leaving only open air. Marissa closed her eyes and tried. At first, the box loomed solid, but then she pictured the flames licking at the edges, turning the wood brittle. She inhaled sharply when it collapsed inward, leaving only space. Her tears came fast, but this time they weren't only pain. They were release. When she opened her eyes, her voice was steadier. "He doesn't get to keep me there forever." The therapist nodded. "That's the work. Not forgetting, but reclaiming." Marissa tucked the tissue into her palm. She wasn't healed. Not yet. Maybe not for years. But she was no longer only surviving. She was beginning to live again. The box would always echo in her mind, but her future was louder. The courtroom was hushed, every breath suspended as the judge shuffled papers and adjusted his glasses. Marissa sat in the gallery, her palms pressed together in her lap, the edges of her nails digging into her skin. She could feel eyes on her, reporters, strangers, even Alex's family. But she kept her gaze steady, fixed on the man who had once whispered love in her ear. Alex sat at the defense table, thinner now, his once polished charm stripped away. The orange jumpsuit made him look smaller, almost ordinary. But Marissa knew better. She had seen the monster behind the smile. The prosecutor's voice cut through the silence. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. 4 days of unlawful imprisonment, physical and psychological trauma. This was not love. It was control. It was cruelty. And the victim, by sheer will, survived what should have been a death sentence." The defense attorney rose, his tone softer, almost pleading. "My client suffers from abandonment issues, unresolved trauma of his own. While his actions were misguided, they were not born from malice. He believed he was protecting her." Marissa's stomach turned. She could hear Alex's words echoing. "This is love. I was protecting you." Even here, surrounded by law and order, he still clung to the lie. The judge leaned forward, voice firm. "Love does not lock a woman in a box. Love does not starve, threaten, or terrorize. This court will not mistake obsession for devotion." The gavel struck. "Alex Turner, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in prison, without the possibility of parole for the first 15. A ripple of sound moved through the courtroom, relief, gasps, murmurs, but Marissa heard none of it. Her eyes were on Alex. For the first time, his mask cracked not with rage, but with despair. His shoulders slumped, his mouth parted as if to call out to her, but no sound came. He was led away in chains, and his wrists bound, his freedom stripped. She didn't look away, not out of vengeance, but because she needed to see the moment her story stopped belonging to him. The bailiff's voice broke the spell. "Court dismissed." People began to rise, papers shuffled, chairs scraped against the floor. Marissa remained seated for a moment longer, her chest tight, her breath shallow. She expected to feel triumph, a wave of victory. Instead, there was only a quiet ache, a recognition that no sentence could erase what had happened inside that box. Her therapist's words returned to her. Justice is not healing. It is closure. Healing is yours to create. Slowly, Marissa stood. Each step toward the exit was deliberate, the echo of her heels against the tile reminding her she was still moving forward. Outside the courthouse, the day was bright. The air was crisp with autumn, leaves skittering across the stone steps. Reporters called her name, cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward. She shielded her eyes, shaking her head, refusing to let her story become spectacle. Instead, she kept walking. Down the steps, past the crowd, past the murmurs that followed her. Her lungs expanded with each breath, the air sharp and alive. She reached the sidewalk and stopped. For a long moment, she simply stood there, her face tilted toward the sky. The light warmed her skin, and she let it wash over her. Freedom. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was the ability to breathe without permission, to step into open space without fear of a lock clicking shut behind her. The scars remained. She knew they always would. But so did her strength. Marissa inhaled deeply, then exhaled, her breath dissolving into the autumn air. She stepped forward, not into someone else's shadow, not into a box, but into her own tomorrow.